Virginia. Currently not at a shop, obviously at home. Sorry, just someone sent me a message I had to read there. We were at the Virginia Comic Con today here in Richmond, Virginia, where we sold tons of wooden anime swords and a handful of steel swords as well. But we're back now. I'm back at home and here to show off one of my coolest new swords. I absolutely love this. This might be my new favorite sword. It is a Ming dynasty style dao. Has this really deep blue saya or scabbard, qiao in Chinese. Some pretty fittings here. Typical Ming dynasty style braid wrap. But what makes this extra cool is the kind of construction here. And thank you, it is a cool sword 3 done. I'm gonna turn on the light. I'm gonna turn on a photography light here. I'm gonna see if we can help you catch the details of the sword, because it really has, there, you can catch it there. I don't know how well you can see it. Hey, Chin Hobby Toys, thanks for joining in. And hello, Dirty Skull, thanks for joining in. I don't know how well you guys can see this. The pattern in the steel. A lot of people would mistake that line. Do you see the, this is the cutting edge on this side. The cutting edge and the spine. And so, hey, wife, why we are physical. Sorry, I had a hard time reading that. And I just realized if you look at the reflection, the way the reflection works on the blade, there's a curvature right at the end. So that means it's also a, what do you call it? Clamshell or a clamshell or an apple seed style blade. I just realized that. That's pretty cool. But I don't know, can you see like the indentations here along the edge? I don't know, holding it up to the light. I should probably put the light facing another direction and you can see this a little better. Hey, Steve. So yeah, this is a really cool, very special Ming Dynasty style sword. And so a lot of people would mistake this for a hamon, a Japanese style hamon, but it's not. It's actually called a horsetooth saber. And so it's a type of lamination method where they use a strip of very hard steel along the edge, and then they use like this sort of pattern in and out, in and out on the body. And so this one's a pattern weld. And I'm going to try to move this light over to another position. Maybe we can get a better look at the patterns in the steel that way. And I'm going to try to see if I can change the angle of this without causing a lot of glare to my poor eyes, or tripping over anything like I almost did there, or having it block. All right, so let's see if I'm going to try this again, and once again see if we can get a better look at the patterns of steel in this sword. I look like a horror movie there. I'm gonna turn this up, and I don't know. Let's see. Can you guys see the pattern in the steel? Because it's folded steel, it's basically Damascus, it's like pattern welded steel on the spine and the body. But once again, the edge is a hard steel. Hey, Bumleaf, I'm doing great. Hey, Jill, thanks for joining me over here as well. That habaki probably makes it possible to choke up like a sanskundo. I'm not sure what that is. It's actually pretty common. It's pretty common for Chinese swords, actually. You will see this on a Chinese sword. Let's see. Hello, Insanity. So while we have the bright lights shining in my poor eyes, I'm going to show you something also that's very cool. And some of you might have seen this on our earlier stream. It's this one here. And I'm going to turn off the light for a second because we really don't need this glare in my poor eyes. So this is the water dragon fittings. There is a sword in the Tokyo National Museum called Suryuken, literally the water dragon. And so this is a replica with the fittings. And this is a race skin saya that has been done a custom color. There's a very large node there. I don't know if I just noticed that for the first time. There's so many things I get swords, I don't really even study them piece by piece to really know what they all are. So anyway, but that's not the coolest thing about this sword. The coolest thing about it is, now I'm going to turn the light back on and see if we can't get the pattern going here. I don't know how well you can see the patterns in the steel, and this is a pattern weld. I think this light needs to be a little farther back. But the problem is that there's too much junk behind this chair, so you really can't see it. And I'm gonna knock something over, so this is like a fail. But okay, once again, I'm gonna see. I don't know how well you guys can see the patterns in the steel there. So this is actually made of meteorite. 30% of it is meteorite steel. And so what ends up when you use meteorite, because it's a very impure steel, the patterns end up very jagged and interesting that way. When I upped the resolution on the stream, the pattern popped. Oh, I didn't even know you could do that. So, yeah. Anyway, it is such a cool thing here. Hello, aimbot. I'm gonna turn off this light and maybe you can see it a little better. I don't know. Ah, screw it. Okay. So anyway, okay, let's see. I'm gonna hold it here and see if my camera will focus in on it. But once again, a meteorite sword. Generally speaking, meteorite does not make for a good sword steel. It's usually, just because of all the impurities, it ends up being a little brittle. But they solve that problem by pattern welding it instead. So it's not all meteorite. So anyway, so this is one of the cool swords we got from Cloudhammer. Turn the red to 1080 from 720, much clearer. Huh, I didn't even know you could do that. I assume you mean the resolution. I will have to figure out how to do that in the future. But anyway, so that's one of the other ones. And then I'll show you the last really cool sword that we got from Cloudhammer. These are all Cloudhammer swords that we got this week. But let me show you the last really cool one, which is this monster here. This guy is 90 centimeters long, the blade length. So we're talking about 35 inches. So compare that to a production katana. And you can see that this one is much longer. And so this one, what's really cool about this is that you can see it's straight. And so this is based on Tang dynasty style swords. This is when Japan was starting to put their own stamp, their own characteristics on their swords that were still based on Chinese swords. So this one is a kogurasu style, but it's a straight kogurasu. So you can see the tip is pointed, and then once you reach here, you can see it has this gorgeous triangle termination bohi right there. And then, so it basically is a flat ridge here. And then this part could be sharpened. It's not sharp now. I was curious about that. It is not sharp now. I mean, I guess if you really tried, you could cut yourself with it. But yeah. And this is made of S5 shock steel. How can I buy a 600-year-old Japanese sword? How much do they normally cost? A 600-year-old sword, you could probably get them for as low as $3,000, but you're not looking at a very high quality one. Usually once you get into that range, like 600 years old, if it's a decent quality, then and it's certified, like usually you're looking maybe 5,000 to 6,000 minimum, and then it can be much more expensive. It all depends. And very weird stream type, okay? Ohayo te. Kochi wa yoru yakedo. So anyway, this is, once again, this one's made of S5 shock steel from Cloudhammer. It is a straight kogurasu maru, or straight moroha, kisaki moroha zukuri. This is, moroha zukuri is that's what I'm looking for in a Japanese sword right now. I'd really love to get an antique sword that is a moroha zukuri. Check out the tsuba on this guy. Where's a good place to buy ancient swords? What do you mean by ancient? How old would you consider ancient to be? And are you specifically talking about Japanese swords, or how much does it weigh? I haven't weighed it out. It's not super heavy. I mean, it's heavier than a standard katana just because there's more steel, but also that thin spine does thin out the weight a little bit. At museums, I'm guessing. I don't think you could buy an antique sword at a museum. I think they probably are there on exhibition. Well, not antique. Antiques, you can get antiques in a lot of different places. You can actually find a lot of antiques at estate sales. Celtic Knight. Good evening, good sir. Do you gentlemen sell Huawei? No. um, I'm a high-end sword collector. What's your opinion of them? Much respect. Cheers. I have never handled a Huawei katana. I really would like to. I hear great things about them. And so based upon people who do know swords really well, I would say they're probably really good, but I can't speak from personal experience. I do know that if you order from them, it can be a very long wait. That's it. I mean, yeah, you know, that's, I think you just, if you go in with that expectation, you won't feel bad. 500 plus year old Japanese swords. So 500-year-old, that's actually an interesting period for Japanese swords because anywhere from about 600 to about 400 years old, Japan is putting out a lot of swords. They're at war during this time. The entire country, not the entire country, but almost the entire country. This is called the Sengoku period in Japanese history, and so they're putting out some. They're pumping out swords really, really quickly, and so you can actually find 500-year-old swords in many different places. There are literally millions of 500-year-old Japanese swords out there. And probably if for one that's in decent condition, you're going to pay at least $2,000. If you get them with certification, then it's going to cost you probably at least 3,000. But once again, it depends. There are a lot of factors involved, like who is the smith, who or what school did it come from. So all those can contribute to that. I have a really old katana my grandpa got in World War II. There doesn't appear to be any signature on the tang. Is there any way to identify it? Yeah. So Joe Jack, one of the interesting things about antique Japanese swords is that probably only about a quarter of them have signatures. One of the things that happens is that, let me see if I have an example here. This is actually a really good example. This sword is about 600 years old, give or take. And one of the interesting things about it, let's see if I can, my eyes are really bad, so I can't, oh, here's the Mikuki. I'm gonna pop the pin on this one so you can see the tang. And so this one doesn't have a signature. And the reason it doesn't have a signature is that the tang was originally much, much longer, but then they cut it off to turn it into a wakizashi. So this was once upon a time, this was a nagamaki. And it has since become a wakizashi. So it was cut down. So sometimes a sword might have been signed, but the signature part got cut off. And then sometimes, many times, the smith didn't bother to sign it, especially during that 400 to 600 years ago, that warring period, when they were putting out swords so fast, they just didn't necessarily want their name to it. So to identify it, you could take it to an expert, and there are many around. I don't consider I'm not one at all for antique swords, but you would take it to an expert, and they could look at a lot of factors. Like they will look at the folds of the steel in the steel, and certain schools did the steel a certain way. You look at the Hummel line, like is it like kind of a straight one? Is it wavy? They'll look at the shape, and they can usually tell you that a sword might be made by a certain school. So that's probably the way to identify that and the age. Are there books you would recommend for the history of katanas or sword? Yes, the Connoisseur's Guide to Japanese Swords. The Connoisseur's Guide to Japanese Swords is excellent for that. Let's see. What are the swordsmiths in China like? Are they artisans like Japanese smiths? How do they get their jobs? So nowadays, how should I say that? It's a very complex answer. There are many different levels of smiths in Japan, and then you have basic workmen who do what's called shaping. So they'll take a bar or a bar of steel and put it through a hydraulic press, stretch it out, do stock removal, heat and quench. And so those are like just very basic swords. And so that's not necessarily a high level of craftsmanship. But then you have some smiths who have put in, thousands of hours of work, and they can make masterpieces. So there are definitely high level smiths. Like Chris Joe is pretty famous. What is the name of the other guy? There are two smiths that really stand out. They're called national level smiths. So yeah, there are some really great Chinese smiths out there. Okay, next question. Thank you for much for your reply. I truly appreciate your knowledge and experience in your craft. Thank you for sharing. Celtic Knight, I would always emphasize that I am not a super expert, especially in antique swords. I'm just merely an enthusiast. And there are a lot of people who know it a lot better than I do. Hey, Ryan. I have Ryan's sword right here. Ryan bought a Satsuma era 150-year-old sword for me. Any specific sites? Does your store sell Japanese swords at 400 to 600 years? So Bodo, we have one sword that's 500 years old. If you go to our website, rvakatana.com, and look up Tegai, 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 or you can look up Sue, S-U-E, like Sue, S-U-E, and that's a 500-year, well, almost 500-year old. It was made in 1532, and it does have certification from the NTHK. So that sword, we do have one that's 500 years old. Do you know the story of why they would have cut it down? Yeah, it's basically you need there are a couple of reasons why. One could be that the sword broke. And so after they broke it, maybe they broke a sword and they had a certain length left, they would just reshape it so that the Tang would be what was originally the blade. That's one reason why you see that. Another reason is sometimes, they just, like during the Tokugawa era, they said a katana could only be a certain length. And so you would have to take your longer swords and cut them down to make them a shorter sword. And once again, the samurai at the time aren't thinking, oh, a collector 500 years from now, really wants a really long sword. They're thinking, how much can I afford? I can't buy a new sword, but I need a wakizashi, so I'll take an old katana and cut it down. So that's a lot of reasons why they would cut it down. Let's see. What did you miss? I showed off a meteorite sword and a really cool Ming Dynasty sword. That's what you missed. Let's see. Everyone's missing movie night. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize people were. Sorry, I didn't mean to move that. Eric, how was the day at the con? My day was awful. I was trying to sell books, my fantasy books, and I didn't do great. Just probably the worst con I have ever done for fantasy books. I only sold 10, and usually I would expect to sell at least 20. But we did really well. Scott and Matt, one of my friends, Matt, or one of our sword friends, Matt, they were selling anime swords, and they sold like about 34, 35, mostly wooden ones. But yeah, they did really well. So Eric sent me a message earlier, Eric Bergeron here, about a cloud hammer he got from us. And so I'll show you another cloud hammer if you're late to the stream. This is a Tachi, the water dragon Tachi. And what's extra cool about this is that it's made from meteorite. Are you Japanese? No, I am not. So I don't know how well you can see the pattern in this, but it is a pattern weld which uses 30% meteorite iron. So it is really cool. Meteorite does not make for a good durable steel. It's more for the status of having a meteorite. Let's see. I know you have Miaodaos in store, but would you know what steel they are since the then pipe back style? I think one of them is pattern weld and one is actually both of them are pattern weld. The two that we have in shop are pattern welded. We did have one that was MN65 spring steel, but it's sold. Let's see. Meteorite sword. How old is it? How was it made? Is blade meteorite? Oh, you answered the question. Yeah. Main thing about it is that it was probably made. This one was only made like 3 months ago, and so yeah. Let's see. Did they acid etch the meteorite to bring out the patterns? Steve, I don't know. I don't know. No, well, I know. Actually, I saw the blade before they polished it, but I'm not exactly sure. I mean, you could already see the striations before it was polished, and after it was polished, it really brought it out. So I'm not sure what they did to polish it. Do you know how to use the swords, or are you a collector seller only? So I have trained in Japanese sword, Kenjutsu, and I have trained in Chinese Jian, which is the straight sword, and I have trained in Wing Chun butterfly swords. Let's see. Can you explain the reasoning behind a reverse sharpened sword? I own one from what I was told from an old anime, Rurouni Kenshin. Yeah, Rurouni Kenshin. So he used it because he didn't want to kill anymore. He was an assassin, and so he didn't want to kill anymore. So instead of putting an edge along the normal side, he made that the dull side, and then the sharp side was on the inside. So he would fight like it was a normal sword, but if he actually wanted to kill somebody, then he would switch it around. But I think in the story he never does. But I could be wrong about that. I've only watched one of them. Have you ever come across Mongolian swords? Authentic Mongolian swords? No, I have never handled an authentic Mongolian sword. So yeah, this is one of the really cool special swords that we got in. And for those of you who are late, this is the other one. This is probably my new favorite Chinese sword that I have. This is a Ming Dynasty style sword. Acid etched or coffee etched are the popular processes. Okay, cool, Ryan. Ryan, I swear, you know so much about swords. I've learned so much from just talking to you. So, Ming Dynasty style sword. And this one is like, oh, I just love this sword. This is probably one of my new favorites. And I don't know how if you can see the pattern in the steel. I think Steve said he was able to see it pretty well, that it popped the patterns. So it is, this is called a horsetooth saber, because what they do is they use a very hard steel for the cutting edge. So imagine this is the edge, and then the body is shaped a little bit like this. So they'll have the folded steel like this to give it sort of a more durability. So the edge is super hard, but not the rest of it. When you put a katana on a rack, do you place the blade up or down? So a katana is displayed with the edge up. So I'm going to turn this around to my one of my racks, and so all these three here are katana, and this one's a wakazashi. These are edge up. These are all tachi, and so all the tachi are edge down. So it's just a matter of how people display the sword, edge up, edge down. Traditionally, what it is that I'll show you this is an antique tachi here. This one's actually about 600 years old. But this is a tachi. The NBTHK has certified this one as being a tachi. And so a tachi would be worn from blade down. And so the signature, if there was one, would be on this side. Versus the katana is worn blade up, and the signature is on this side. So the display, people will say that the edge will dull or it'll cut through the sheath. I highly doubt that. I just from a logical point of view, if the sword is just sitting here and not rubbing against anything, if it's not moving, I don't see it dulling. Also, the habaki will keep it from touching the inside of the blade. So if it's a good fit, so I don't really believe that it will damage the sheath or the edge if it's just held this way. But the key detail is that the tachi is worn blade down, the signature faces out, and katana is worn blade up, and the signature faces out, and that's how you display them. So let's see. Eric asks, John, do you happen to know what steels they use for my cloud hammer? If you don't know right off, could you find out? I'm curious. So Eric, they used, I think, 51 CRV4 as the core steel, and they folded M2 and I think 15 NM for the jacket steel. So you have folded steel wrapped around a spring steel. That is a really beautiful sword. I was very sad to see that go. What is the hand wrap material on the Ming sword? I actually don't know. Traditionally, they would use silk, but I don't think this is silk. I'll ask. I actually don't know what it's made out of. Let's see. Reminder to turn your notifications so you never miss an upload. Well, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I love this Ming sword. And once again, if you're joining in late and missed this is the other really cool cloud hammer sword that came this week. This is an S5 shock steel sword, but you'll notice it's very straight, yet it is a Japanese style. And so this type of sword is what you start seeing is around 700 AD, when they are starting to transform their Chinese style swords to give them Japanese characteristics. And so this one is what's called a kisaki kisaki moroha. So the tip or the long end is double-edged, but then the body is single-edged. So this is a pretty cool, I'm a big fan of this one. This is S5 shock steel though. So it's a modern sword. This one's probably only about 2 years old. It's been sitting in Cloudhammer's warehouse for a while. And then I was talking to the boss about Ming Dynasty style swords. And one of the interesting things that you see during the Ming Dynasty is that there are lots of pirates, Japanese pirates raiding the coasts. And so a lot of Japanese swords fell into the hands of Chinese. And so the Chinese start imitating Japanese swords, and they're called Wodao. And then, so I was talking to the boss of Cloudhammer about Wodao, and then he showed me that sword, showed me a picture, and I was like, I want it. So, yeah. Always have the ska facing the right. You never know when you need that edge. What sword is my favorite? Can Chinese citizens own swords? Chinese citizens cannot own sharp swords, but they can definitely own swords. There is a huge market, especially for movies and stuff, and so yeah, they can own swords. What is my favorite? What is my favorite? So my favorite would be this one. Well, this is probably one of my two favorites. This is a tie. This sword is at least 700 years old and potentially 1,000 years old. I got this from Ray Singer of swordsofjapan.com, or rather, he helped me get it. It's not wrapped yet, but I'm gonna get this wrapped. It's possibly a Ko Naminohira, and he can tell. Remember, someone was asking about how can you tell who made a sword. There are characteristics of this sword that say it is a Naminohira sword. And Naminohira is in the Satsuma, which is modern day Kyushu, around Kagoshima. And what I really like about the sword is what's called a slender tachi. And so if you look right here close in, and this is my finger right behind it, it's like not much wider than one of my digits, which is about an inch. So it's about an inch wide at the base. And then when you come down to the very tip here, you can see the tip is less than the size of my digit. So this is called what's a slender tachi. And it also has what's called a marumune, a rounded mune. You can see the spine of it is rounded. So it has like all these cool characteristics to it. Plus, it's anywhere from 700 to 1,000 years old. So this is my favorite sword. I plan on getting it mounted correctly pretty soon. Right now it's in Saranmaki. And this is either my favorite or my second favorite. I'm a big fan of big swords and big curves. And this is a tachi. And I'm gonna see if I can do this here. I'm gonna turn this light back on and see if you guys can't see the patterns in the steel. Because this sword is just, there's just so much to love about this sword in terms of the steel patterns. And I'm going to try to hold it. Okay. I don't know how well, if you can see the patterns in the steel or not. But it has what's called aisugi. It's just a pattern where it's actually very similar to pattern welding, where they use different carbon contents to make folds in the steel. And so it is just really gorgeous. So this is my favorite. This one is at least 650 years old and potentially 800 years old. So huge curve to it. So this is one of my favorite. I like things that are long, old, curved, and a little bit different. So let's see. Being a complete noob to swords, do you know any beginner sword that would be hand forged, hand folded, and forged at a decent price point, preferably a katana? Are you looking for one to practice with, or are you looking for something just have for fun that you could cut if you needed to, but you don't plan on using it day in, day out? Or are you looking for something that you're going to use on a regular basis? Because that contributes a lot to the answer. I have an expensive handmade folded steel katana and would like to know what modern sword is selling for. So they can sell anywhere, like if it's a hand forged sword, anywhere from 100 to up and up and up. It really depends. Also depends on where it's made, who made it. Do you have anything that aren't swords, like pole arms or hammers? I do not. Do you notice a rise in popularity within this culture of sword collecting? Not really. What would you recommend for a mono-tempered steel? S5? Eric Bergeron, what are you planning on doing with it? If you plan on like regular cutting, like if you're cutting like tatami mats, cutting bamboo, I would actually recommend SX105E. It's cheaper than S5, and it holds an edge better than S5. It's just not as tough as S5. If you want to abuse your sword, then S5, yes, that's what you want to use for ultimate abuse. Now, if you want something with really good edge retention, like the best edge retention, then CPM 3V, but you're looking at about $2,000, or ASAB 88, which we have. I have an ASAB 88 sword here, but this one's not for sale until I remount it, because the blade, I got a new ASAB 88 blade from Cloudhammer for it. This one had some corrosion in it from when they dyed it, but this is ASAB 88, and it's basically a tougher version of D2 steel. And so it holds an edge really, really well. Excellent edge retention, excellent chip resistance. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's a great sword, ASAB 88. Do you have any European swords? Yeah. This is a Cloudhammer longsword. And plus our shop has several from Hanwei and Tinker and Legacy Arms. So this one we loaned to the Queen's Gambit, the competition in Charlotte, North Carolina, and many people tested it. Many people loved the sword. They thought it performed very, very nicely. In fact, the person who got second place used this. He was using this sword. And what else do I have here? This is Cloudhammer S5 arming sword, or I'm sorry, hand and a half sword. Very lightweight. Actually, it's very, very super well balanced. I think the point of balance is like fairly close to fairly close to the guard. So this is Cloudhammer S5. I don't know if they're going to make any more of these, but I have one that's supposed to be on the way. I've just been waiting for it. And here's a Cloudhammer arming sword, also made of S5 shock steel. Let's see. Yeah, would be cutting. So Eric Bergeron, if depends on what you are cutting. Let's just say that. Jet 4 practice. For a forged folded practice steel, we sell them for about $250. If you go to our website, look for fold. Just do a search on folded steel, and you can get them from us. You could also look at some from Hanwei or Dragon King. They do pretty good. And once again, if you get them from us, you'll get them cheaper than most places. If you find a cheaper price for Dragon King or Hanwei, we can beat the price most likely. T10 is king. Change my mind. T10 is good. It works great, but it's not particularly strong. If you go to Matthew Jensen's website, he uses one of our 51 CRV4 German spring steel sword, hits a T10 blade, and snaps the T10 blade. So T10 is just not very durable compared to many modern steels. And the reason why is that differential hardening makes the sword less durable. And it gives it better edge retention. Basically, it gives it a harder edge, but it does make it a little more susceptible to bending and breaking. Let's see. In your store, do you have the Cloudhammer Odachi with the longer tsuka? The Cloudhammer Odachi we have has a pretty short. It only has a 12-inch tsuka. I was actually kind of disappointed by that. In the future, once we sell out, we're probably going to get 14-inch tsuka, but right now we only have 12-inch. Love my SX105V sword. The edge retention is much better than my 9260. Awesome, JDeck. Where did you get your SX105V from? Matthew Hodge. Which one's my favorite? It changes all the time. Is your S5 blade here? No, it's downstairs. It's downstairs. Sorry about that. Have you seen Kenpachi Zak from Bleach? I've never watched Bleach. I know about it though. Let's see. For the Horde. So cutting tatami, water bottles, and noodles, that type of stuff. You know, probably SX105V is going to be the best that we have from Cloudhammer. Or ASAP. If you really want to go higher, ASAP 88 would probably be better. Just the best edge retention. S5 is kind of overkill for those targets. It's like, why would you use S5? Why would you pay that much for S5 when you're not going to be smashing it against something? Let's see. Awesome. I'd rather go with y'all. Thanks. T10's edge will chip easily if you're not good in aligning your edge. This is very true. I'm not that great of a cutter. I have yet to chip a T10 edge, but this is definitely the case. T10 can chip. Actually, L6 is even worse in terms of chipping. So what is the stronger, SX105V or the German spring steel? So Jill, SX105V has a better edge retention, harder edge, better edge retention than the German spring steel. But the German spring steel is tougher. Like I think the German spring steel takes 86 joules to break the German spring steel versus I think it's 60 joules for the SX105V. I could be wrong about that. My stats, I've forgotten them. I got it from you, John. Okay, it's through Harden. Awesome. Oh, you got the Unukubi. Awesome. Oh, did you? Oh, yeah. The SX105 Unukubi were really nice. They were some really great swords. You're not addicted to blades, are you? Gunto. So we have one Gunto in the shop. It is made of railway steel, actually. And so we have one left. We're not carrying them anymore. This is a Gunto that I got from one of my patients who got it from a local vet who got it in Okinawa. This one is a family blade that I plan on getting evaluated. But if it turns out to be a nice blade, I would have it remounted. I'm not a big fan of Gunto because to me they represent a lot of nastiness. I mean, they were never used like in combat against competent people. They were used to execute unarmed women and children. So I don't regret having this one, but I do regret picking up Gunto. We've actually reduced the price of our Gunto so we can move them. I'd be happy to just be totally done with them. Let's see. 1095 is still my go-to, but T10 is great for practice. Cool. Where can I get that shirt? Go to our website, rvakatana.com, and look under apparel, and we sell it. No, but it's the same as John's sword. Okay, I know who you are now. I remember you got it for Christmas last year. Your mom got it for you for Christmas, if I remember correctly. So yeah, we only had three of those onukubi, and they were, I love them. They were great, and you got them for a great price. Because later, I mean, Cloudhammer, it was an overrun. It was for their German client, and he had three extra, so he sold me three extra for a lot less. So, half-breed samurai in the house. So all these really cool people to follow. Yeah, for those of you who are just joining in, and sorry for those of you who've been watching for a while, this is one of the new Cloudhammer swords that came in. This is the Water Dragon fittings. The Tachi has this gorgeous, gorgeous, what do you call it? Ray skin saya. But the highlight of this particular sword is that it's made of meteorite pattern weld, meteorite Damascus. And I don't know how well you can see the patterns in this particular steel, but one of the cool things about meteorite Damascus is that it makes just these really wacky folds. So this is, we just got this in. The shop just got this in. We will be putting it up for sale. I'm going to enjoy it for a week or so before I put it up for sale because I really love this one. Thing is, I can get another one if I really wanted to. Check out the Sageo on this one too. So this is one of the ones that we got in, and the other one we got in that I love. This is probably, someone asked about my favorite. This is my new favorite Chinese sword in my collection. This one is a Ming dynasty style sword. It's a little bit on the small side, but what's really cool about it is the construction. It's called a horsetooth construction. So has a ray skin wrap. Yeah. All right, I think my daughter went to bed. She goes to bed early, so I'm gonna shut this down. Thanks for watching. I don't want to be too loud while she's trying to sleep. I think that Tachi is sweet. Yeah, it is gorgeous. That Tachi is amazing. Okay, all right. I'm going to go shut down because I think my daughter wants to go to bed, or she probably already is and is probably really pissed off at me for talking. So I'm going to bid you all good night, and thank you for spending some of your Saturday night with me. Good night.